Nicole, you knew exactly what I was going to say. Hello, good morning. Let me say now, since we're on the recording now. Hello, everyone. Welcome so much to our second edition of the Metadata Learning and Unlearning Summit. This has been sort of a prize event for Curationist for a while now, but this is the first one that we're broadcasting live instead of holding privately. And then announcing some research, publishing some findings of the conversation. So I'm so excited to see all of our amazing panelists today, my amazing fellow co-organizers, Nicole, Sharon, Jessica, frankly, more of the organizers than I am. And of course, one of our board members, Evelyn, is here online with us and is going to be participating in this conversation as a panelist too. I think if we want to officially get started, good morning, Sadiq. I see you in the chat. Good morning, Garrett. Oh my gosh, yes. One of the original founders of the Metadata Learning and Unlearning team is here. Good morning, Garrett. I can't wait to have, I have a couple of questions for you. Um, Nicole, do you want to go ahead and get started sharing our slides so I can set us off? Thank you so much. So I'll just go over our agenda very quickly this morning. We're going to do introductions of all of our panelists in just a second. And as I'll give you a brief overview of Curationist itself and what we do here. Then we're going to let our experts jump into the findings of their research when it came to investigating Wikidata and Wikibase. We'll do a little conversation internally to the panel, and then some Q&A with everyone who's in attendance. We'll wrap it up with a couple closing remarks and send everyone on their way, hopefully with a little bit fuller understanding of Wikidata, Wikibase, and how it might integrate into the open repository system. I will go ahead and get started with a couple introductions of our panelists. We are hoping still to be joined by Annie Saisto. If she pops on later, I will definitely read her bio then. We also have here today Ben Vershbo, who is the Director of Community Programs at the Wikimedia Foundation, which is, of course, the nonprofit organization that hosts Wikipedia and other global free knowledge projects. We also have Christos Varvantakis, who's a partnership manager at Wikimedia Deutschland, Evelyn, who's the program director for Wikimedistas de Uruguay, and like I mentioned, one of our on the board of our directors here at Curationist. We have Hanu Lans, who's a founder of CopyClear, Sandra Falconier, who's a strategist and producer of digital projects focused on open access and linked open data in the cultural sector, and Siobhan McCaffrey, who's a project manager at the IRDC with a focus on Indigenous data comments. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have a moment later when we begin the responses from this amazing panel for each of you to introduce yourselves in a little bit more in depth and share with everyone more focus on exactly what you're working on at these amazing organizations. Nicole, can we go to the next slide, please? Good morning, Karen. I'm also in Brooklyn, New York. So let me tell you just briefly about Curationist and start to frame this discussion today. Curationist, for those who aren't familiar, is a free tool that makes millions of digital images of artworks, artifacts, and cultural heritage accessible in one place. I often describe Curationist at heart as a search aggregator. It is an open repository that sources in cultural heritage object records from institutions all around the world and makes them findable in one place. That's an amazing achievement. I've got a dev team behind me who are hard at work every day, making sure that these processes of metadata normalization run really smoothly. Nicole, can we go back? Thank you. Making sure that these processes run really smoothly. And in that process, there's a lot of additional work we do with metadata. We work with archivists, metadata experts, research fellows, art critics, and art writers in general to also contribute new metadata to a lot of these records, further completing the intellectual history behind these objects and continuing to make them more accessible. The more metadata we have around each of these objects, the more findable they become. I can also talk to you a little bit later about some of the technological processes we're doing with search in order to continue being able to surface each of these artifacts in the most robust way, as well as some opportunities we have for new and burgeoning archives who want to be a part of the collections here at Curationist. All that being said, today, we are really here to dig in deep on metadata. When we talk about making things accessible and making things findable on the internet, making cultural heritage as surfaceable as possible, we're not only interested in doing that on Curationist, we're also interested in how we make sure that this metadata can be as interoperable throughout the whole open ecosystem as possible. And so towards that end, earlier this year, some of our project staff have honed in on researching Wikidata and Wikibase as potential schemas for the metadata records that we source in at Curationist in order to see if that would be something that would enable us to share our work, to share these items more robustly with the rest of the ecosystem. So I'm going to turn it over now to our team who did that research to take you through the questions they asked, the discoveries they made, and their preliminary recommendations. The whole summit this year is around this question. Should we transition to a Wikidata or Wikibase schema? Sharon, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. And I see that Annie has just joined us. And apologies for the technical difficulties, Annie. Annie Saisto has worked at the Pori Art Museum as a chief curator since 2012. The Pori Art Museum is a contemporary art museum in Pori in Finland. So thank you so much, and for joining us as well. Nicole, could I have the next slide? Great. So my name is Sharon Mizoda, and I'm a metadata consultant who has been working with Curationist since 2020. Jessica Gengler, who was my partner in doing this research, is Curationist digital archivist. And today we're going to present our work looking at how Curationist might integrate its metadata more closely with Wikidata. But first, we're going to do a brief land acknowledgement from each of us, because we're both in different places, as the Curationist team is distributed all over the world, actually. So I come to you today from the unceded territories of the Tongva and Chumash peoples. I acknowledge the devastation of colonial warfare and cultural genocide that separated these nations and all indigenous peoples in North America from control of their homelands. I acknowledge that as a settler on these lands, I have benefited from this separation, and I honor and pay respect to these ancestors and communities who continue to nurture life on this land, and so I support them in the resurgence of Indigenous rights and sovereignty. Jessica, do you want to give your land acknowledgement?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. I acknowledge and honor that I am situated on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Hinnonoetin, Tesestas, Nemana, Chahiksi Chahiks, Sosoni, Ocheti Shakowin, and Nuchu nations and people. This area is an important site of trade, gathering, and healing for these native tribes. I recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. I honor the fact that, despite forced removal and land dispossession, they continue to thrive as resilient members of this community.
Great, thank you. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so in the spring, the Curationist leaders expressed an interest in exploring the use of Wikidata properties as a metadata schema. Since its inception, Curationist has used Wikidata as the sole source of controlled descriptive terminology for the metadata we add to records contributed by our partners. Jessica and I have long been interested in integrating the Curationist system with Wikidata in a way that would make the search, selection, and management of terminology more seamless, and to take advantage of the rich connections that Wikidata's linked open data provides. So today we're going to walk you through our research into two main questions. One, should Curationist migrate its metadata to a new schema based on Wikidata properties? And two, should it implement Wikibase as a repository for managing its descriptive terminology? In exposing our research and learning process, we hope to provide useful information for others interested in learning about and implementing Wiki solutions. We also hope to get additional insights from our amazing panelists today. We're going to be learning in public, so hopefully you'll be patient with us. Just a note on our methodologies. Our research for both questions consisted of a review of documentation of similar Wikidata and Wikibase projects. We also conducted an analysis of Wikidata models and did some exploratory mapping. And we consulted with the LD4 Art and Design Affinity Group, curationist developer Mitchell Parsons, and 3 other Wiki experts. And of course, this session is a continuation of that interview process in some ways. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the first question, whether to use Wikidata properties as a schema. So I will go over the background for this research, our findings across all the different modalities that we used, and then I'll share some preliminary conclusions and our recommendation. Next slide, please. But first, just a quick refresher on Wikidata. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but for the purposes of this presentation, it is important to understand Wikidata properties. Properties are the data elements available on Wikidata to describe an item. They define what is knowable, and there are literally thousands of them. So here, for this item representing Douglas Adams, the first statement has the property educated at, which is the data element containing all the places this person went to school. Next slide, please. Okay, a little background here. So Curationist's current metadata schema is a modified version of VRA Core 4, which was developed for visual materials and is maintained by the Library of Congress. VRA Core 4 was selected because it includes many of the elements our contributors capture in their metadata, and because it includes attributes, which enable the recording of the source of each data element. This feature of VRA Core 4 facilitates the metadata layering that differentiates Curationist from other aggregators. We have found that there is no one schema that predominates among our current contributors. They use a variety of schemas, mostly custom ones. So as an example, on this slide and the next slide are the various element names for date across our current Curationist contributors. And as you can see, they vary a lot and no two are the same. So currently, onboarding new contributors requires mapping elements to the Curationist schema on a case-by-case basis. So we could have the next slide. So as you can see, again, they're all different. And again, the next slide, please. Okay, so there are a number of cultural heritage and visual art wiki projects that use a pre-selected group of Wikidata properties or wiki text elements as ad hoc schemas for creating and uploading data in Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons. These data models tell Wikimedians which properties to focus on when they participate in a wiki project. We looked at 12 cultural heritage data models for Wikidata and 1 from Wikimedia Commons and compared them with our Curationist schema. While there was no one model that covered all of the elements of the Curationist schema, the closest was Wiki Project Visual Arts. Oh, and I'm sorry, that arrow got misaligned. It should be pointing to the last item on that list, which has 47 elements that map to elements and sub-elements in the Curationist schema. Next slide, please. So here's a bar graph of the main Curationist elements along the bottom, and then the number of Wikidata and Commons data models that have equivalent elements ordered from the most common to the least. As you can see in that area with the red bracket, Curationist priorities and Wikidata's emphases are not exactly aligned. So while date, location, source, work type, and agent are all key pieces of data in most models, subject, rights, cultural context, and description are less represented. Those are towards the end there with the orange arrows. These are the elements where Curationist is most likely to add new metadata. So this difference reflects the different orientations of the data sources, whereas Wikidata in particular is more interested in unambiguous data that can be used to create connections. Curationist is more concerned with discovery, nuance, and interpretation of cultural heritage through a social justice lens. Next slide, please. Another observation that emerged from this review was that the names of Wikidata properties are specific to Wikidata. They were developed not as a descriptive system, but were crowdsourced as people needed them and do not necessarily correspond to other existing schema. Wikidata also contains property names that may be awkward, too precise, or not precise enough for cultural heritage collections. Examples of odd-sounding properties include inception, which is widely used for start date or creation date, unless you are describing a person, and then you might use date of birth, and instance of, which is widely used for work type, object type, or classification, etc., in other schemas. There are also properties that have the same or overlapping meanings, such as creator and author, based on and inspired by, depicts, and main subject. These overlaps can make thorough and complete searching of Wikidata a fool's errand, as you can never be sure to have covered all of the relevant properties in any one query. Next slide, please. Okay, so we did a mapping, starting with the data model closest to our schema, Wiki Project Visual Arts. We attempted to map Wikidata properties to the curationist schema. Of the 97 elements, sub-elements, and attributes that make up the curationist schema, we were able to find equivalents in Wikidata properties for 44. By this somewhat crude measure, that means that only 45% of the curationist schema can be represented in Wikidata. However, the actual percentage is much lower due to several issues we encountered in the mapping process. And this link would show you the full mapping attempt in a Google Sheet. Next slide, please. Is that the right? No. Oh, you clicked on the link. Sorry, can we go back to?
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Yeah, no worries. I can just start. It's really just the next slide is just a list. So there are several areas of incompatibility when mapping between curationist and Wikidata. So Wikidata types. Every Wikidata property has a default data type, and most Wikidata properties have the data type item, which means they expect a link to a Wikidata item and do not accept strings or text values. By contrast, most curationist data values are strings or text. So basically, we could migrate our current data to a schema based on Wikidata properties, but the vast majority of our data, which is over 4 million records, would not be shareable with Wikidata. Yeah, could we, I think yes, that's the right slide. Okay, the other main area of incompatibility is the description element. Wikidata uses this property mainly to disambiguate items that have the same label or name, and descriptions are usually very short phrases. By contrast, descriptions on Curationist are often much longer and discursive and provide more detail. And then we found a number of other data elements with serious incompatibilities, such as measurements, copyright, provenance, display order, contributor accounts, language, and images. Next slide, please. Okay, we also looked at several documented projects where institutions were uploading their metadata to Wikidata or round-tripping it, uploading and then downloading records enhanced by crowdsourcing back to their own repository, or they were using Wikidata as a way station to share their data with an aggregator. And here, these are all very detailed projects. I'm just going to give you the sort of top-level learnings that we gleaned from each. So the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City did a one-way sharing of some of their selected data to Wikidata. Here we learned that uploading for them was a multi-step, highly technical process, and in order to accurately and non-duplicatively share data with Wikidata, it was hardly seamless and required a lot of technical intervention. And we also learned that their mapping process was still manual. Despite all the technological know-how involved in this project, the mapping between the METS data and Wikidata was still maintained in a spreadsheet. That was very sobering. The Swedish National Heritage Board did a study of Wikidata round-tripping to pilot with 3 organizations. And from here, we learned that exporting information from Wikidata was exponentially easier than from Wikimedia Commons, just because Wikidata has more structured data. I also learned the phrase upload debt, where uploaded data is always changing in the wiki world, and it's very difficult to stay up to date and not create duplicate records. And the biggest barriers for the institutions in this pilot were technical staffing, money, and incompatible tech. So staffing and money are obvious needs. Those are perennial. But this study found a major barrier to be the variety of collection management systems in use at these institutions. Each museum had a different one, which meant the upload and import process had to be customized for each one. And that's something that we're very familiar with at Curationist. And then finally, collection data from Wikidata to Finna, which I'm very happy that Annie is here because she can tell you more about this project, was also a project where small museums were using Wikidata and Omeka as a way to get their collections into an aggregator. So here we took away that it was mapping that mattered and not migrating. They mapped their existing data to a limited set of Wikidata properties specifically for sharing. And once that was done, it did not need to be repeated for future uploads, so that was more streamlined. They were able to use mostly existing tools like Omeka, OpenRefine, and Cradle, although they did develop a custom edit tracking tool for this project. And then they used Omeka instead of Wikimedia Commons as an image repository, which facilitated greater control and avoided the potentially messy interface with Commons. Next slide, please. Okay, so our interviews. We spoke with two wiki experts, Evelyn Heidel, who's here with us today, and Virginia Poundstone, Senior Product Manager at Wikimedia Foundation. Virginia was the former platform director at Curationist and so is uniquely positioned to understand both our goals and challenges and the priorities and requirements of using and interfacing with Wikimedia products. So we asked them what they thought about using Wikidata properties as a metadata schema and the possibility of using Wikidata in concert with Wikimedia Commons as an online repository for smaller organizations looking to share their collections online or with Curationist. Overall, they agreed that using Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons as a bridge between smaller organizations and Curationist is a good idea, but they had reservations. First, it would require sharing only a subset of their data that is compatible with Wikidata. It is not a long-term solution for digital storage and should not be an organization's only digital repository. And it would involve significant technical hurdles, possibly turning Curationist into a service provider, and it would require the skills of an experienced Wikimedia engineer to facilitate providing this service. Next slide, please. Okay, our preliminary conclusions and recommendation for this part of the research project were that Wikidata and Curationist are different types of repositories. So Wikidata was designed as a repository for authority records. Curationist was designed as a repository for artworks and artifacts. And although Wikidata includes records for many artworks and artifacts, it was not designed to hold more nuanced and discursive information about them, which is where Curationist excels. Next is data incompatibilities. The vast majority of data currently in the Curationist database is not in a format that is shareable with Wikidata. So there's really no point in using a schema based on Wikidata properties if we are not able to share our data with Wikidata easily. And then we learned that sharing with Wikidata is complex. Institutions that are already contributing their data to Wikidata have to perform multiple data cleansing, deduping, and other technical steps to prepare and upload it properly. Sharing data with Wikidata is not a task that should be undertaken lightly. And then Wikidata and Commons could be a low-cost way station for smaller organizations who want to share their data with Curationist, but providing the technical solutions and training to do so would be a very heavy lift. So for these reasons, we do not recommend migrating Curationist data to a new schema based on Wikidata properties. Instead, we recommend creating a mapping between Wikidata and the Curationist schema that could be used to share a subset of Wikidata-ready metadata with Wikidata. Too many datas in that sentence. And now I will turn it over to Jessica to talk about our research into using Wikibase as a way to manage our controlled vocabularies.
Thanks, Sharon. As Sharon mentioned, Curationist uses Wikidata as a controlled vocabulary for all the terms we add as a metadata layer to the work records on the site. A work is how we refer to any artwork, artifact, or document represented on the curationist site. A little bit about Wikibase. Wikibase is a software platform developed by Wikimedia Deutschland that allows you to create your own database similar to Wikidata. In fact, Wikidata itself is the largest instance of Wikibase. We are interested in using Wikibase for its customization of properties, including their names and quantity. This flexibility enables each instance of Wikibase to function independently from Wikidata, making it suitable for managing custom vocabularies. Next slide, please. So our current process for adding metadata layers is first, the curationist archivist determines what terms are needed and searches them in Wikidata. If the term or a synonym is available, we would determine if the current Wikidata label is respectful and accurate. If yes, then we add it to our internal curationist taxonomy spreadsheet, and then we add it to the appropriate field on the individual works metadata spreadsheet, an example of which is on this slide. If the Wikidata label is not respectful and or accurate, we would either use an existing alias for that Wikidata term or add a new alias for our use. If the term is not in Wikidata, then we would create a new Wikidata term and then add the new term to our taxonomy seen here. Next slide, please. So this is our taxonomy, a little snippet of our taxonomy spreadsheet. The spreadsheets with the works metadata are then ingested into the curationist website. This process requires a lot of shuffling between spreadsheets, Wikidata, our website, and source institutions. However, our CMS is coming, so we would like to streamline this process for when our CMS is implemented. We hope that this integration will simplify term discovery and assignment, while also enhancing search and navigation on the curationist site. Implementing a linked open data vocabulary in the curationist backend will offer additional benefits on the front end, allowing us to convert all Wikidata terms assigned to work records into links that connect to other works with the same term. It would provide links to Wikidata, allowing users to explore the source of each term, and it would improve search functionality by leveraging Wikidata aliases as a built-in source of synonyms. Next. All right, we researched 12 Wikibase projects that overlapped with our interest in Wikibase. So I will briefly share some of what we learned from this research, focusing on 4 projects. One instance we looked at was Rhizome's ArtBase. Although the visual representation of ArtBase's Sparkle queries is intriguing, faceted searching is not supported. So additionally, the reliance on Sparkle introduces a steeper learning curve for effective querying. The current ArtBase interface also lacks contextual relationships between the artworks, leading to only a single entry point for each work, which would reduce discoverability. The Smithsonian Institution. The Wikibase installation is currently accessible only to Smithsonian staff for experimentation. While they improved the representation of Smithsonian organizations in Wikidata, integrating publications proved difficult due to author name disambiguation and linking challenges, highlighting the complexities of decentralized platforms like Wikidata. Luxembourg Ministry of Culture. Most of the technical hurdles encountered in this project were related to mapping from CyDocCRM to the Wikibase data model, which is structured like Wikidata's. We wouldn't have that issue because we would be sourcing our data from Wikidata, and our current authority file is the spreadsheet form, which we saw in a previous slide, which could more easily be reformatted for ingest into a Wikibase. OCLC National Libraries. While our project shares some goals with OCLC's experiment, interoperability across multiple databases is not necessarily a priority at this time. Creating a curationist vocabulary for others to use is also not our focus. Additionally, OCLC's concerns about the scalability and cost of maintaining a Wikibase are relevant to us. So given the unpredictability of crowdsourced data on Wikidata, it may be more practical to connect directly to Wikidata rather than setting up and maintaining a separate Wikibase. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Oh, we lost it. That's okay. I'll go ahead and chat about it. So the next slide talks about use cases for institutional Wikibase instances, which is a document created by library staff at Columbia University, Harvard University, New York University, and the University of Pennsylvania. It outlines various use cases for Wikibase to assist organizations in determining if it suits their needs. According to the document, Wikibase would be appropriate for our needs. These cases in the document are relevant to what we want to do. We have entities, people mostly, that do not meet Wikidata's criteria for notability and identification. We do want to use locally preferred labels while pointing to the main Wikidata labels. We want our terminology to appear as links in the curationist public interface, both to other works with the same terms and to the Wikidata page for each term. Curationist is not fully multilingual yet, but Wikibase would support this functionality when it becomes available. Publishing of local thesauri and authorities as linked open data for external use. This is a lower priority for us currently, but still something we are interested in. And then eventually we could share our local terminology to Wikidata, which would help improve the cultural heritage ecosystem. Next slide. This slide just links to a couple of tools we found that would be useful should we pursue creating a Wikibase. We found that Wikibase is backed by a strong community developing open source tools that improve its interoperability with Wikidata. However, while Wikidata remains widely used, the future of these tools is uncertain, so that does pose some risk. Okay, next slide. All right, we interviewed 3 parties while conducting our research. Allison Sherrick and Diego Pino of Digital Culture of Metropolitan New York. Evelyn Heidel, who is also on our panel today, and Mitchell Parsons, who is our curationist developer. So Allison and Diego built a feature into their open source repository called Archipelago, which reconciles source terms with Wikidata during metadata import. They warned against using Wikibase as an intermediary, citing difficulties in syncing with Wikidata. I believe the phrase they said was pain, pain, pain. They also noted that even the German National Library switched from using Wikibase to only using Wikidata. In their system, terminology is reconciled once at ingestion without continuous updates when Wikidata changes. Unlike Curationist, however, they don't create or add preferred terms. Now, Evelyn believed that setting up a Wikibase that maps to Wikidata rather than relying solely on Wikidata makes more sense due to scaling issues, especially with queries in Wikimedia Commons. A dedicated Wikibase would enable more effective querying of diverse data. When we spoke to Mitchell, he thought that from an implementation perspective, Wikibase is a practical solution for managing terminology, especially with its Docker setup. Syncing it with Wikidata, possibly using Wikisync, would involve ongoing maintenance, but any improvement would require effort. We also thought we should probably reflect on our own experience with curationist metadata as the archivists here. We noticed that while some preferred terms were initially missing in Wikidata, they often get added over time, reducing the need for a standalone Wikibase for custom terms. However, Wikidata does struggle with consistent hierarchy, so having our own Wikibase would give us better control over hierarchical relationships and improve term selection. In the curationist taxonomy, our terms are grouped by the metadata element they're likely to be used in, helping archivists choose terms more efficiently. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show this as an example of a works page with our curationist metadata layers added. You can see the little square there shows the metadata that we have added as an additional layer. So the hierarchy of terms often is helpful for us to kind of choose these terms. All right, next slide. Okay, if we decide to go with Wikibase, there are 3 different options for installing and using it. So we have the basic Wikibase and Wikibase Suite, which both require a server with compatible hardware and software installed. Though this setup does offer more flexibility, more technical expertise and maintenance would be required. Wikibase Cloud is the other option, which is a complete installation of Wikibase that is hosted by Wikimedia Deutschland, meaning no server installation or server maintenance would be required. We were unclear about whether third-party software can be run on Wikibase Cloud. However, and we would need to create an imprint, which is a legally mandated statement of ownership and authorship, since we are not a German organization. Next slide, please. So our preliminary thoughts and conclusions surrounding using Wikibase. A direct connection to Wikidata seems expeditious, but it would require more work and would leave us dependent on its updates and structure, which could complicate finding and assigning correct terms compared to our current spreadsheet system. Setting up a Wikibase would offer the flexibility we desire with our terminology and hierarchy, but there's a risk that without regular upkeep, it could fall out of sync and become outdated, which we have experienced with our current spreadsheet setup. Though Wikibase Suite offers many features, it would still need installation, ongoing technical and metadata maintenance to remain functional and relevant. So we are uncertain about using Wikibase. We hope that the discussions here today will help us come to a more concrete recommendation about using Wikibase. Next slide. So finally, our preliminary overall recommendations after conducting all this research. Through our research on Wikidata, Wikibase, and Wikimedia Commons, we've gained valuable insights, although there's still a lot to learn. Based on our findings, we offer the following recommendations, subject to change after this discussion. Wikidata properties as a schema, we are pretty firmly in the no category on this question. We believe Curationists should retain its current schema, mapping it to select Wikidata properties and Wikitext templates. This will enable sharing metadata with Wikidata and museum services partners using Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons. Wikibase for controlled vocabulary. We would say yes with some reservations. Ideally, our CMS would integrate Wikidata and Curationist taxonomy for term searches, allowing archivists to apply terms with their Wikidata QIDs. Each term would then appear in the public interface as a link that would bring up all the other Curationist records to which that term has been applied. Ideally, there would also be a secondary link to the terms page on Wikidata or in the Curationist Wikibase. A Wikibase would let us control terminology and hierarchies, but maintaining synchronization with ever-changing Wikidata requires significant IT and metadata resources. Without regular updates, a Wikibase risks becoming an isolated, outdated resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon and Jessica. I'm so grateful for all of your thought, work, research, and conversations around this. Yes, I want to do a little react emoji too. Applause. So thank you so much for all of that work, all of that labor, all of that intellectual lifts. And then thank you again for being able to present it in such a clear, straightforward way. I'm always dazzled by when I'm thinking about this, it feels so nebulous and complicated in my mind. And then I talk to Sharon, I talk to Jessica, and it all really comes clear. There was so much in there to dig into. I've seen so many expressions on our panelists' faces as they were listening along, and our chat has been discussing a wide variety of the topics you guys have brought up. So I'm really excited to dig in and start the conversation with our panelists. Many of you might have heard yourself named, might have heard your organization named. So we really do have a panel of experts here to help weigh in. And of course, like Sharon said up top, we are learning in public right now. So we're ready to hear all thoughts and feelings about it. That being said, I'd like to begin first by letting each of our panelists introduce themselves in a much more in-depth way, if they feel so inclined. So I'm happy to just go through the list and call on you and make sure that everyone gets a chance to lay out their name, their organization, and what brought them to this project today. Sandra, can I ask to start with you?
Sure. I'm Sandra Fauconnier. You introduced me as a strategist producer in on the digital projects in the cultural sector. I am based in the Netherlands, and I indeed work in the cultural sector as a freelancer on all sorts of online projects, video projects. In my free time, and sometimes also professionally, I also engage a lot with Wikidata. I am less experienced with Wikibase, so I don't have the practical experience in setting up Wikibases, but I am a very active Wikidata editor in the field of cultural heritage in the broadest sense. And yeah, I hope to bring some perspective from that side.
Thank you so much. We hope so too. Ben, I know you've dialed in by phone. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, sorry, there's a little delay with the unmute. I'm on a phone. So this is a kind of a peculiar experience because I'm listening very intently, but I'm not seeing any slides or any chat. So I'll probably be a more minimal participant, but I'm really glad to be hearing this and part of the conversation as best as I can be. Yeah, as was mentioned, my name is Ben Vershbow. I'm Director of Community Programs at the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the host of Wikipedia and many other open knowledge projects. We work very closely with Wikimedia Deutschland as one of our major affiliates and technology partners on Wikidata, Wikibase. My background, before getting deep into the Wikimedia space, I've been working for years at the intersection of kind of internet and culture and institutions. I was at the New York Public Library for over 8 years. I ran the MYPL Labs program, which did a lot of work around digitized collections and opening them up to more intensive participation from the public, like through crowdsourcing and open data initiatives. In terms of this conversation, I've been thinking a lot about the intersection of Wikidata, Wikibase, and the cultural sector for a long time, but more from kind of like a broader strategic perspective. I'm not as much of a hands-on practitioner as someone like Sandra, who we actually used to work together at the foundation for some time. But thinking a lot about, what are the right kind of, how should we be, what is the sweet spot of alignment and overlap between the practices and the systems maintained by cultural institutions and newer outfits like curationists with these large kind of knowledge curation platforms like Wikidata? And then also, how does that enable content aggregated and described there to populate the world's leading online encyclopedia as a kind of a front door to general knowledge and how to visually enrich that knowledge? So yeah, and to be quite honest, I haven't been following this as closely in the last year or two. So it was very informative to get that kind of update of the research you did and hear some of the latest kind of findings from some of these pioneers and early adopters that you interviewed. So yeah, I'm really glad to be part of this discussion, and I'll probably not say a whole lot more because I can't see anyone, but I'm here and learning as we go. Thanks.
We're so grateful for your voice. Thank you so much, Ben. Ani, I know you came in just a little bit after I had done short introductions, so please let me turn it over to you for a full introduction.
Hi. Should I give an introduction?
Yeah, sure, Hannah, we can take you as well, and then we'll.
Oh, okay. No, I thought you mentioned me, but sorry.
That's totally fine. Ani?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it was really interesting to hear about your project, and I've been kind of struggling with the tech here, but now I'm here, luckily. And sorry for that, for the delay. But yeah, it was very interesting to hear about your work because it's quite different from ours, because I've worked in an art museum and it's about like migrating our, or like delivering our data to the world, and we also produce it and think about how to improve it for our own sake as well as a cultural institution. And then you are a bit similar to, in my mind, to Fina, which is a Finnish version of curationist kind of. So it's an aggregator and a platform for users that combines like data from different cultural institutions. And so I'm kind of setting my mind to your like needs, so to speak. So, and I'm not very into Wikibase either, like Sandra said, and it's more about Wikidata I'm familiar with, so I'm better to comment about that, and also maybe about like about the collection of data and how to improve that maybe, and like enlarge it like you have been doing, which is great work, really.
Thank you so much. Hanno, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yes. I'm Hanno Lans. I'm from the Netherlands, and I work for museums in the Netherlands to put all the information of the creators in Wikidata. We also do this for all the design museums, so that we get an overview of who are all the designers in the Netherlands. And Wikidata is really a great hub for that, because all the information gets improved by the date of birth and educated ads. And you can also see in which other museums people are. So if we all connect that data, we get a real rich profile of the creators. And we also run scripts that we have a copyright status of the creator, so that we know if the work of the creator is public domain or still copyrighted. That works very well. And oh yeah, I also work with a museum network with an implementation of Wikibase. To use that for Asian art, to import that and aggregate that as on a platform. That's more complex to run Wikibase and to import the data from other museums, because it's all the mapping structure, the date structure, what you mentioned as well. And to keep that in sync, it's really a lot of work for developers. Yeah. Oh yeah, and we had a solution that you said that in Wikibase you need an ID for example, the property place, for example. But what we do is we put in there an empty value with a qualifier with the text, and then we do a lookup, and then we put there the real ID value when we found that, so that we have a presentation text and an ID identifier in one for every property.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Hanno. Christos, can I turn it over to you?
Sure, thank you very much. I'm Christos. I'm working as a partner manager at Wikimedia Deutschland. I am in the data partnerships team at the software development department, where we work basically on partnerships around Wikidata and Wikibase. It's an excellent research what you have done. It seriously, it really describes the image and the situation that I have seen. As a partner manager, having been talking the last 2 years plus that I'm in this role with various institutions globally. It's a very meaningful approach. It makes very good sense what you have been describing until now. And yes, I mean, to the extent that you want to have control over your data model, to the extent that you want to use the properties that you want to use and data types for the properties that you will be using, then everything points indeed towards, creating your own Wiki-based instance. Will that be easy? No, it will not. I mean, the people who have been saying and commenting on the fact that there is like work, there are things to be done. Totally, yeah, there are things to be done. But still, the best workaround would be, in my opinion, what you basically are suggesting, and others have been writing on the chat to map to create a Wiki-based instance and to map to cross-reference with Wikidata wherever this works for you, let's say, and you think that might work for Wikidata as well. And there is a lot of really nice work being done, especially recently, around federated queries also. So beyond just, creating or recreating properties, cross-referencing properties, mapping your properties, and then thinking in terms of Sparkle queries. And yes, Sparkle is complicated, but it's really powerful too. So thinking around this framework and how you can actually drag from both sources, I think it's it goes beyond the hierarchical, traditional, and nominative, if you like, billing of a database. It's making use of the possibilities that the linked open data web actually affords, so to say, for a more rhizomatic way of organizing and accessing information. But I will stop here. I will share many resources with you. There are some things that I think you will find relevant, but doesn't make sense to bring now in the conversation. And I think there are some people and some users of Wikibase in here in the room who are way more experts than what I am. So I really like, if we make sure that there is a lot of space, there is enough space for people to chip in. Thank you. Bye.
Yes, we definitely will be taking public Q&A from all of the amazing experts that have been chiming in our chat. I'll take that cue, Christos, thank you, to remind people to use the Q&A function as well, to make sure that their question gets flagged for the panelists. I am keeping an eye on the chat, but that's a really good way to make sure that I see it. So thank you so much, Christos, and we're definitely going to loop back for resources and next steps in just a second. But Siobhan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, folks. My name is Siobhan McCafferty. I'm part of the Australian Research Data Commons. So we're a federally funded national collaborative research infrastructure facility, kind of a project. We're a bit amorphous in that way. And I wear a few hats at the organisation, both of which are actually kind of appropriate to talk about here. So the reason I'm here is from a fortuitous meeting at Open Repositories, where we started talking about TK labels, which was great. And that comes from part of my work as part of the Humanities, Social Sciences and Indigenous Data Research Data Commons, which is a mouthful. HASI RDC. So ARDC is organised into a series of thematic research data commons, one for planet, one for people, so health data, environmental data, and then a bit of a grab bag of humanities, social sciences and Indigenous data. But it's an area where we're doing a lot of really interesting work, and I help coordinate a few projects in there. One in particular is the Language Data Commons, Australian Language Data Commons, so LDACA. And they've done tremendous work with pre-existing corpus and also building tools on top of that to do a bit more analytic work, but working at grassroots level as well. Australia is an incredibly linguistically diverse community. Asia Pacific, is a massive community. So we try and ratchet that down to look at Australian collections and I think PNG as well. So the work being done there with the LDACA crew has been really interesting because it means we are, in some cases, building vocabularies, but trying really hard not to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's where this conversation is really interesting for me right now, because how can we do these things better working with non-research communities, using open source tools and facilitate them kind of coming up to where the playing field is so that we can work with research and public consumers of that information. The other hat I wear is in persistent identifiers, and I work as part of the ARDC services team. So I have a lot to do with particularly ORCID. I helped write some standards around persistent identifier use, and I work with the IGSN folk and RAID. So where I think that intersects is how do we collect relevant information at the research point of work, so field work. How do we identify users, objects, places, add in those TK notices and labels appropriately so that that metadata can be used later on and be reflected in tools and services. So I'm really very honoured to be part of this conversation. Thanks for including me and bringing me along, and I'm learning a whole lot here. Thank you.
I'm so happy to hear that, Siobhan. Thank you for joining us. And I definitely want to loop back around to the question of multi-language support, because that's something that's certainly on my mind a lot. And I think you and I have that in common. And finally, I'll pass it to Evelyn, who was one of the interviewees for this project and also is on our board of directors.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just want to start with a clarification. I'm not an expert or specialist on either Wikibase or Wikidata. Like that's not my thing. My main recommendation actually when they were interviewing me was like, oh, you should ask Sandra. She knows more about this stuff. So that was like my main recommendation for all of this. And you know, yeah, that's kind of the thing. And I just want to like call out like an interesting project that it's going on right now in Uruguay, and I see that Jorge is there among the people that are listening to this call. But like that's something that's going on right now in Uruguay. That's like something developed by Jorge, a community member for Wikimedia Uruguay, from Wikimedia Uruguay and other like projects, Creative Commons Uruguay, whatever. And he's actually like providing an interface that uses Wikidata to find works that are in the public domain. And so I think it's an interesting use case also of like Wikidata. I don't have much to say around the research. I think there are always questions on like which like CMS you should pick and which data model. Like this is an interesting learning summit for me as well too, because we are having some of these conversations with our local partners here in Uruguay also, because as you probably know, like for me, like one of the main conversation is like whenever you have like limited, like resource limited environments or like constraints on how many resources you have, like these questions are important because you are not going to be changing. It's like buying a house, right? You're not going to be buying a house every 5 years. And so you want to make sure that when you buy your house, you have like an important criteria against when you make that decision. So thanks for inviting me to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Yes, we want a house that's going to last a lifetime if possible. And towards that end, I think my first question for the panel, but also for the researchers themselves, is what should our next step be? Like, what's the takeaway? How do we move forward from here? Yes, Sandra, I see you with your hand raised.
Yes. As I very briefly introduced myself and not really went into giving feedback on the presentation you gave, I think I'm aligned with I think what most people have said and with the research you've done. I think you went really quite deeply in the pros and cons of all approaches, and I totally follow your line of thinking. But I mentioned I don't have the hands-on experience of working with Wikibase, and I think it would be interesting to just do a test with that. Like go to Wikibase Cloud, create a Wikibase, and see how easy you find it to use it. I think one question that I also have is when I hear you say, okay, you do a lot of mapping with, you currently use Wikidata a lot for, describing objects on the curationist website. Wikidata seems to fulfill many cases where seems to fulfill many of your needs, but there is a fraction where that is not the case. So like there might be use of disrespectful language on Wikidata. There might be terms that are simply missing there. I am just wondering whether you have made the balance a little bit of account, like how many cases in how many cases is Wikidata really insufficient? Is it like 10%? Is it 50%? I think that will also define which direction you will go. I'm actually personally very curious about that because I'm one of the editors on Wikidata who I would love to get to be informed about the terms that are missing from Wikidata. And I would totally say, but I'm an inclusionist, I would totally say, feel free to add the terms you need. Also look in other vocabularies. I think there was a comment in the chat or in the Q&A, like does Wikidata also link to something like the Homosaurus, to other thesauri? Yes, it does. So go look in other thesauri, whether the term is present there, and feel free to create Wikidata items. So in that sense, I would say for using a vocabulary, do not dismiss Wikidata entirely. See if the technicalities of working with Wikibase suit your purpose. I think for the hierarchy, that might indeed be a good idea because Wikidata is a total mess, and I'd also throw my hands in the air in that area. But yeah, I would say experiment. But I totally follow your reasoning. I totally see where your arguments are coming from. And yeah, 5 cents. Curious what the others think.
Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a comment you made. I mean, I don't know about like percentage wise, but I will say that Wikidata, it's very rare that I'm like, this term is like, we can't use this, or I have to add an alias. It's pretty rare. So I think a lot of times it's just more to do with like our preferences. For example, like we always try to use like person first language. So, we're careful with, instead of saying like, for example, disabled person, we say person with disabilities. But then the biggest thing, which I also am adding new Wikidata items if needed. But I think the main time that I do that is like with our names, like names of the artists or creators of the works. So yeah, I mean, like you said, it's great. There's no way we're dismissing Wikidata using Wikidata because I love it. And so yeah, it is rare that we have to add a new item. Sometimes we're just adding a new alias and using that.
Thanks, Jessica, and thank you, Sandra. Christos?
Yes, sorry. By no means, when I think by no means you should dismiss the idea of Wikidata anyway. There are issues about the notability criteria if you're thinking, and when you're thinking about, also with regards to referencing data, the data you're using, there are issues, but there is absolutely no reason to dismiss it. You can gain from it and you can enrich it. I think this is not something. The question is how to use it, actually, how to make the best use of it. As with regards to next steps, basically what Sandra says is a very, very sensible approach. Like, yeah, just choose a small data set. Don't go large, like something that you can control, you can actually make happen, and do a proof of concept. I have seen this happening a few times. I think it's a very meaningful approach. But also talk with other people, because Wikibase, it's not a software. It's not like something, only. It's an ecosystem. It's the people who are using it and the organizations who are using it who actually know it and understand it and can really. So you have been talking, keep on talking with people, join the community. There is a very, very lively community. It's sometimes even moving to see, how much support and self-support happens in there. There are groups like the Wikibase stakeholder group, other more thematically focused groups that are being, and also there are, of course, independent, like third-party service providers and consultants. By now, there is a lot of capacity in the ecosystem. There can be much more, I'm sure. But I mean, there are also professionals who can specifically support you on this. So I would suggest, yeah, join the ecosystem, take a look on what's happening there, get into conversations, and speak specifically also with some particular organizations about what they did and how much pain it was at the end and so on, right? And I can gladly, we can talk about this. I have some such organizations in mind that I think it would be meaningful you get into conversation with. Thanks.
Thank you, Christos. Yes, I'm fascinated by the idea that Wikidata, Wikibase is a community more than it is a software tool. And that's the great benefit of working in the open knowledge system broadly, is the way that people come together to co-create these things. Were there other thoughts from Sharon, Jessica, or any of our other panelists on what next steps should be? Hannah? Hannah, I saw you pop off mute. Did you have
Oh, yes. No, I was wondering if you didn't. Is it an idea that you have the persons, the creators, you have the vocabularies like the materials and the subjects, and you have the artworks. But in the research, you didn't make a distinction between them. And is that not is it an is it an idea to say, for example, persons and the creators could be edited on Wikidata, but artworks on a Wikibase, for example, or
Yeah, we're not making a distinction between we use Wikidata for everything. So right now that's in a giant spreadsheet. We would like it to be somewhere a little more interoperable so that we could take advantage of the links, you know, with Wikidata and between works that share the same features. But we use Wikidata for people, we use it for media, we use it for technique, we use it for subjects, even dates like the centuries, assigning centuries. So we use it for across the board for everything.
Thanks, guys. Ani, I see you next.
Yeah, I was thinking a bit the same that Hanno did, that like I don't know if I understood correctly about your earlier presentation, but if I understood correctly, it was like you said that you wouldn't like to like use artists linked to Wikidata, or like the artists who are also like items in the Wikidata and they contain a lot of information. So have you considered to like use that or benefit somehow of that in your platform? Because I think there would be also an interesting opportunity maybe to impact on the data that is about artists in the Wikidata, about the cultural context, for instance. I don't know if maybe that's out of your scope, but I would also like always like to try to think a bit more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that if we had an artist, a work by an artist in Wikidata, and you were also able to search, you know, I don't know, all the other artists who went to the same school that they did or something, you know, like but I feel like for us right now, that's like a few steps down the road to be able to take advantage of that rich data. But yeah, that would definitely be something that I would like to see. But right now we're just trying to figure out, and also one of the issues, because all of our work, all of the works on Curationist are public domain or Creative Commons 0 or CC. I always get the CC BY.
CC BY and CC0, yes. And public domain.
Yeah. A lot of the makers or creators of the works are not, they don't meet the notability criteria for Wikidata. So that's, you know, always a consideration. But yes, eventually we would love to be able to take advantage of all the rich biographical data on Wikidata. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a dream. To scope out from this conversation, I think this really shows how even not something as minor, but a seemingly behind the scenes detail like a Wikidata relationship would have huge ramifications for our editorial features, for the way that our critics and writers and researchers are able to source and draw connections across things in the database. So yeah, the ramifications of a metadata structure really, they go everywhere, which is fascinating to me. So thank you for that, Ani. Are there other thoughts around this from our panelists? I think Ani and Hannah were fringing us there, but my last question for the panelists in particular is, do you agree with our conclusions? Do you feel like we are making the correct choice for our work, our project, and our our staff capacity? I'm seeing some nods, I'm seeing some uncertainties.
If I can add to that, I'd also like to know if we got stuff wrong, or what we're missing as well.
Absolutely. Siobhan?
I think it can be really difficult to make a right choice. I don't think there's a right choice. I think there's the choice you make, and then being nimble enough to figure out if you're going in the right direction. So all of the work that you've done looking at Wikibase, looking at the vocabularies is from my non-expert kind of position is the right thing to do. And I think having these discussions in public with other members of the community helps mitigate any of those missteps. So if you make a decision about something and then the next month realize that none of those crossworks are going to work, that's fine, because in a way you've stopped it from going into production because you've shared it with the community. So yeah, non-expert opinion there is no missteps, and very impressed by the amount of research going into making these decisions.
Thank you, Siobhan. Yes, we were really excited to be able to sort of, again, that phrase Sharon used, learn in public and sort of turn our findings open so that we could immediately and sort of collaboratively hear this feedback. So I'm really appreciative for your comments.
My professional methodology is strap a rocket to it, but always hold a fire extinguisher.
That's beautiful. You should stitch that on a pillow. I think we have a similar institutional culture at Curationist. Ani, I see you with your hand up.
Yeah, it was like I'm kind of very much agreeing with her that it's like really a matter of like just making your decision and then going on and trying with that, even though I understand that it can be also tough with as a big or with the large data set to do something, but you can start small, and also maybe to keep in mind that you are always a part of a community there, and there's like Wikidata is like a massive community, and also what I adore about it is that it's like semantic web also. So it's always like you are really joining this massive network, and it can also be like in many surprising ways it can be enriching experience, really. So it might surprise you what new like ideas it brings along the way, although it also can be messy in the same time. But in my opinion, it's like from a museum professional point of view, some data details, metadata gets like too generalized when you transport it or migrate it to Wikidata and onwards, but some data improves. So there is like two things going on in the same time there. And maybe still like it's about searching about balance between the two. So some things are getting like better there when you like when the data has traveled through Wikidata, and some have gone like a bit too general level, but yet I think it's more rewarding than it's like taking from you. So really, it's a community you are joining.
Absolutely. Coming back all the time to that sense of Wikidata as a community, not a tool. That's been a really useful reframe of this idea for me. I think that's my major takeaway from this conversation today. Other thoughts from the panelists?
Maybe I can jump in, and this is more of a question. I wonder, because like in part, like some of the let's say pains or like the results that you're also sharing, like has to do a lot with like curation as being like an aggregator from other institutions. So I do wonder like how much conversation you've had or like you're willing to have with like the institutions that you're ingesting from, because that might also be an interesting, it might be an interesting conversation to have too as well, like how the institutions that you're ingesting data from are also seeing at this problem. Because in a way, I think that this is more of the larger like problem or kind of, you know, discussion around the ecosystem in a way that it's like, you know, like the open free knowledge projects, like they have started always with like this volunteer community approach, right? But we know that like cultural heritage institutions and like large institutions do actually have a lot that they could contribute if they weren't as siloed as they are sometimes. And so I think like kind of like bridging that gap might be an interesting role that curationists could explore. So that's the question for you, right? Like how much are you willing to talk, or how much have you talked with like the institutions that you're ingesting data from?
I really appreciate that comment, Evelyn. Certainly, I'll say from my perspective, which is less on the deep technical side and more on the community building side as platform director, we have had really lovely relationships, collaborative relationships with some of our source institutions, and some, of course, are very, you know, here's the API, do whatever you want with it, go wild. So it's definitely a mix, but as I think all of our panelists know, and as some people who are watching along may know, we are getting ready to open a pilot program to start working with much smaller organizations from the ground up who are looking to open license and then put online, put in open repositories their digital collections. And I think this is a great opportunity to really be positioning ourselves to advocate for this system in smaller organizations, because they'll be starting, like I said, from the ground up. There's no system in existence to retrofit. And what I'm hearing today is that might be a really cleaner approach to being able to move in that direction without having to do a lot of heavy lifting ourselves in the metadata. I'm so grateful for all of these panelists. Ben, did you hop off mute with a comment? Perhaps. Excellent. Well, I do see our executive director, Christian Dawson, in the chat. So I'm going to read Christian's comment out loud and use that as our transition to a few minutes of general Q&A with everyone who's watching along with us. So anyone who has a question, please go ahead and add that in the Q&A functionality or type it in the chat and I'll read it aloud for you and our panelists can weigh in. But on the topic of our last conversation, Christian just said, my thoughts include wanting to avoid letting source institutions be gatekeepers, but some degree of collaboration is important. One way to do this will be to facilitate ways to donate metadata layering work back to source institutions. Absolutely. That's something that has been on my wish list, certainly, for a long time. And conversations like this help us get closer and closer to it all the time. Thank you, Garrett, for that lovely comment in the chat. Yes, Garrett was on the original metadata learning and unlearning team, and you can see articles, features, interviews, etc. that Garrett wrote and sourced from other metadata experts, all on the Curationist website. So please go there if you're interested. I will recap a couple things that were happening in the Q&A as we were chatting. I want to thank all of our attendees for being so participatory and collaborative right along with us. We did get a question about what Cradle is that Lawrence and Evelyn have both answered. We got a really lovely, Sue Tyson asked an absolute beginner's question, she said, but I'm really grateful for it because it's always good to lay the foundations. And that question was about how all of these integrate using vocabularies. And she gave a few examples. And those have been really well recapped, again, by Lawrence, but also Sandra. Thank you so much. We got a brief question about how having a working RDF ontology for VRA Core 5 could interface with this. And we also got questions about the best way to report inconsistencies in metadata. So all of that information is all there in the chat. Questions asked and answered by our panelists and by some people who are joining in the chat. I can tell we have a lot of experts back in our watching audience as well. In our last 3 minutes, I want to ask our panelists, I want to ask our viewers if there are any final pressing thoughts. And I would particularly love to hear from Sharon and Jessica what your key takeaways from the conversation today are.
Yeah, I think I just have more thoughts and questions and ideas now, which is really great. I'm not sure if we shared this, I'm sure you did, Amanda, but we'll also be publishing our full report. So stay tuned for that if you want to look more deeply into our research. Yeah, I just thank everyone for their insights. As someone who uses Wikidata very consistently, I still feel like I don't know anything about it. So I'm always learning new things, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be in a virtual room with all of you folks.
Yes, I second that. And I think I'm just taking away that, this is just the beginning of a journey. And it's really heartening to know that we're not alone in trying to figure this stuff out. So I'm very grateful for everyone's time today. And to our very active chat. Really appreciate everybody who's been chiming in. I'm definitely going to ask for a copy of that chat. And I think we should be able to make the slides also from this presentation available, because there's several links and mentions of resources in there that might be useful for folks as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. I will say we are definitely going to be sharing this recording. We are definitely going to be sharing the slides, and we're definitely going to be sharing a final report that sort of summarizes not just that initial research, but also sort of the takeaways from this conversation. So this is absolutely the beginning, and I really have to thank Sharon and Jessica for, again, all of that deep research and your great ability to make it seem so straightforward. I have to thank all of our amazing panelists just for I would say the compliment of your close attention. Just looking around this little Zoom call and realizing how many minds at work we have here is so meaningful to me. Thank you to everyone who showed up to watch along. I saw lots of familiar names in the chat, which makes me really happy. And of course, many new ones that I'm looking forward to getting to know and collaborating with. And towards that end, I'm going to put my email in the chat. I've shared it a few times before. But if you have an idea, a thought, a comment, a question that we didn't get to today, please don't hesitate to send me an email. I would be happy to either answer you or find someone who can. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you. Much more on this to come. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.